Part 1, The Formative Years.
Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Blake. It's great to be here with you. Haven't seen you in a while.
That's right.
Looking forward to having a chat with you.
So, for the purpose of those that are joining us for the first time, you are our 17th interview.
Wow.
Yeah. So we've done several of these, but you're also going to be our coup de grace, kind of the end piece here as we go into the holidays. So you and I have a history, but it's been many years since we've seen each other. But in terms of explanation, so folks that are joining us for the first time perhaps know what Fireside is about. Let me just do a brief little primer on that. So it's got really sort of four origins. One was what I would call sort of provocative client questions. I had a number of questions from sort of late 30-something, early 40-something leaders that were asking, how do I make the leap from being a manager to truly a leader?
Sure.
And so that's kind of an interesting thought that got me thinking a little bit about that. And then I had two unexpected client deaths, clients that have been around for a long time. And, one died of cancer and, one of sort of diabetic related issues, but they passed away very suddenly and it sort of startled me. And then I was visiting with a client who said, Blake, I only wish that I learned certain things earlier in my career.
Right.
And then the fourth and final piece was, I was visiting with a man in his 80s who's kind of a sage in his field, and he said if I could go back to my 45-year-old self and whisper in his ears, the things I'd tell him.
Sure.
So all that sort of got me really ruminative this year about aging and legacy and intentionality around being a great leader. So I know that you've had sort of a storied career in a lot of different seasons, but you've also been through some exciting things here recently. We'll get to those soon enough. So let's start with maybe just a recap of the seasons of your career. What are sort of the things that you've been through and experienced, and we'll start to unpack them.
Sure. Well, I grew up in a little town called Archer City, Texas. That's just north of Wichita Falls, or north of the Oklahoma border, basically. And we were, my brother and I and mother were very poor. And so we had to learn early on that you kind of had to figure out how you made things work. She would be gone most of the time. I would be fixing breakfast and stuff for my younger brother and taking care of him and making sure he got to school in time and that kind of thing. So, and being a young boy myself at 7, 8 years old, that was not always the easiest lesson to learn. But what it did teach me is that you needed to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and do what you needed to do to get the job done. So, I had an alcoholic father who abused me and my mother as well. My younger brother was very young at the time we decided, or she decided to, that was enough of that, and to go seek some help with some friends of hers, and we moved out and moved away. So, and that was in a place called San Diego, where we ended up moving to. So moved in with some friends there, and again, finally got to a place where we could live on our own. And then we got a little house and basically moved in there and lived there for a while. And then my aunt and uncle from Archer City basically called and said, look, we can provide a support system for you here that you don't have out there, and smaller town and smaller community. So that's what happened, is we moved back to, or moved to Texas when I was in the third grade. So, and grew up there from then on. So basically my early years were one of trying to figure out, how to be the man of the house when you're 7, 8 years old, and also learning how to make things happen, right? So I always had some kind of a money-making scheme going on somewhere. I either sold Christmas cards or there's, nobody will know what this is, but the Grit newspaper. So those kinds of things were things that I was doing to create an income so I could have some spending money and that kind of thing, because we just didn't have any. So that was kind of my early years and growing up in a town that was relatively small, and you know, basically had some help around to help my mother out, keep us and that kind of thing when she was not available. So
Yeah. How would you describe your mom? How do you?
my mother was a very hardworking lady. She did, again, whatever it took. We had to stay on the move pretty good because some creditor was after us or something. So anyway, I don't have a lot of remembrance of those times, but what I do remember was not pleasant. So again, you have to have those memories, kind of figure out how you push them down or get them out of your thought process as you're trying to mature. So you know, those kinds of things are details that surface from time to time with me. It's been pretty rare, but I remember one time in high school they really came rushing back to me that I wasn't like some of the other kids that had fathers, and who do you look up to? Where do you find your leadership skills? Where do you find the guidance to teach you how to be a man, basically, right? Mm-hmm. And so those are the kinds of things that I was dealing with in my younger years. So,
what came of him and when?
He ended up basically not ever being involved in our life. Never gave any child support. Never gave any kind of support, basically. So he was run over on the side of a road in California, and I don't know a lot of the detail about it, but he ended up being killed in that accident.
Goodness, and how old were you?
I was probably 35 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your brother?
My brother is an attorney. He lives over in Rockwell, and basically he has 3 children and a wife, and has done very well for himself and does a good job of basically raising his children and being a great father and a husband to his wife. So he's done very well.
Are you close? You still?
Yes, we have lunch probably once, twice a month, something like that. So we get together as often as we can.
Okay. So you've had, obviously, you know, in those formative years, a lot of valley events. What would you describe as some of the peak events? What are the things that you really remember fondly that positively influenced you?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I learned early on is I would try to find someone I wanted to model my life after. Someone who had something that I looked at and said, you know, that's what I want to aspire to, right?
Yeah, right.
So there was a gentleman in Archer City by the name of Bill Abernathy, and I was headed down the wrong track. I'm going to tell you, at a young age, I was doing some things that I shouldn't have been doing, and I'm talking about 7th grade and 8th grade. So those years, I'm not very proud of the things that I did, and was already drinking and getting behind the wheel, drunk and those kinds of things. So I was headed down the wrong path quickly. And this guy invited me to come out and work on his ranch for him, along with 2 guys that I respected on the football team that were like senior to me by 4 or 5 years. And so they were kind of peers that I said, well, if they're working out there, and maybe I ought to go give that a shot. And I would kind of be accepted, if you will, at that level. So I went out there and started working for him, and he taught me a great deal.
Wow.
and just really helped me start forming the kind of man that I wanted to be.
Yeah.
That was a lot different than what I was moving toward.
Yeah.
So, a Christian man, and I saw basically his life being transformed right in front of me, and I watched it happen myself.
Wow.
And one day he came in and he said to me, Bob, you know what? I don't think I have a good witness with my smoking. And he says, I'm not going to smoke anymore. And from that minute on, I never saw him take another cigarette, never smoked again. And I'm talking about forever since I knew him, until he passed away.
Yeah.
And he did the same thing about using the Lord's name in vain. He said, you know, they were around cowboys all the time and around that kind of environment. And when you are, I mean, it's easy to fall into that trap, right?
Sure.
So, but he, again, came and said, I'm not going to do that anymore. I never heard another curse word out of his mouth again until he passed away. And he and I became business partners later on after I graduated from college and left the University of New Mexico. So anyway, so he was very evident that he made some real changes in my life, and he and his wife basically mentored me and helped me through some teenage years to make some decisions and make some choices about direction in life that I hold dear today.
Wow.
So Bisa and Bill Abernathy were really special people in my life. So that was a high for me. I mean, those are the kinds of things that I spent basically my life looking for, that father figure that I never had, right?
Yep.
To look toward and see if there's a person out there that I could model my life after. So based on those encounters early, I started really getting into athletics and pushed away friendships and people that I knew that were taking me down the wrong road, and started hanging around with people that had a mission and a goal in their life, and basically to win and be the best you could be in an athletic perspective. So that's what I started pursuing.
Yeah.
And I pursued it with everything I had. So, and did okay with it. I mean, I had great years there in Archer City and ended up getting a scholarship and played for the University of New Mexico, where I was captain and all conference defensive back there. So again, all that came from those kinds of early memories and early prompting from a mentor.
Right. And so I suppose they also showed you a model for marriage.
Absolutely, yes. And again, a very solid marriage. And again, you looked at what they provided, and you saw that they were different than other things that you saw around, and you didn't see the infidelity and the arguments and those kinds of things that you see in a lot of other marriages. I mean, they had differences, but they worked those differences out. And that's been another thing that I've done all my life, because they've showed me, hey, you make a commitment to one woman, then honor that commitment. So,
how did can you recall specifically how they treated each other? Any examples of how they talked to each other? You know, I think marriage is a great model for a lot of things that we do in life.
Absolutely. So yes, I think that you know, they had a mutual respect for one another and a mutual bond with one another that took each other's feelings and took each other's needs and wants into their perspective, and said, okay, I need to bend, or I need to be open to hear those kinds of things, rather than just closed off and say it's my way or the highway.
Right.
They did not operate that way. They were very giving to each other and very willing to see the other person's point of view.
Yeah, and I think a lot about that is about respect.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Respecting another person and their point of view. So if we pause there, as you're just now in college, let's say,
Okay.
and you have to describe yourself, your temperament, your personality, the things that energize you, the things that drain you, how would you describe yourself? You're obviously now very purposeful,
Right.
and you've got affiliation, you've got connection with a group of guys,
Right.
Yeah.
And so that bond was very, very good. First of all, I was a long way from home. And
Right.
so being that far away from home in an environment that was very foreign to the environment from a conservative, small town, Archer City, Texas, to all of a sudden Albuquerque, New Mexico, where there were hippies taking baths in the local pond there at the middle of the university at the fountain.
Right.
And it was a wild time, as a lot of your viewers will be able to understand.
Yep.
And free love and drugs and all kinds of things. And to a boy from Archer City, that was
Culture shock.
pretty good culture shock. And
Yeah.
not only that, but you saw all the adobe buildings, and I scratch my head sometimes. What have I gotten myself into here? So, but anyway, it was exactly where God wanted me to be, and He had me there for a reason. So, I understand that today, that I maybe wouldn't have understood it as much then.
Right.
But I didn't have a lot of counsel when I made the decision to go out there. I mean, it was a scholarship that was offered to me. I had some other options that I turned down, but I got injured when I was in high school, and New Mexico stayed with me the whole time, where these other schools didn't think that I was going to maybe be able to recover from a knee operation, a shoulder operation at the same time. And so they stayed with me the whole time. And again, my loyalty that I had built into my DNA said that's where I need to go. So
Yeah. So
that's how I made that decision. And so anyway, getting back to the university, it was definitely a culture shock, and something that, again, I was in a foreign land with foreign things going on, and I had to somehow adjust and make the best of it.
Well, you'd already learned, obviously, as like you described, a 7 or 8 year old boy, to be industrious and relatively independent.
Yes.
Now that you're in college, would you describe yourself as disciplined? Like, to what extent did you have your act together?
Well, I would say from the football standpoint, it's pretty good. Educationally, I would say not so good.
Okay.
So I was not as disciplined as I wished I would have been. As you get older, you see some of the things that you could have done better, and that was definitely one of them, is to grasp your studies and do some of that stuff better than I did. But again, college, in my opinion, is not so much about learning all of the absolutes about education as it is you're trying to get to an end goal, and you have to work through that end goal. Now, we couldn't just not show up to class. I mean, you had to go to class, and you had to make a certain grade point, and as long as you did that, then you could play. But and keep your scholarship. But if you didn't do that, then you lose your scholarship. So it was always very important to me to make that grade, even though it might be right at the bottom.
Right.
You do enough to get by, to do what you really like to do, which was to compete and to be an athlete and to be connected with the people that were your teammates. So.
Yeah. Was that your primary social circle?
Yes, I started to get into a fraternity and basically went through the pledge side of it, and then decided to get married. And I said, well, if I'm going to get married, I can't be a fraternity guy.
Right.
So I just was tired of the long distance relationship with my wife, Gail, or to-be wife, Gail, and she was way far away in Wichita Falls, Texas, and so I said, it's time for us to get married and start our life, even though I'm not through a school. And again, a lot of the guys that I grew up with, they once they got married, they said, well, we can't do both. But I was always a type A personality and needed to go
Run through the wall.
make things happen and run through the wall. That's right.
Now, how did you meet Gail?
Gail and I were high school sweethearts
Okay.
in Archer City, and so she and I went to the 8th grade banquet together, and I took her out then, and then we kind of lost connection with each other until I was about a sophomore, and then we started dating again and dated until we got married. So,
How would you describe her? How does she compliment you?
she is totally different than I am.
Okay.
She's very much of a I'm not going to say a perfectionist. I'm going to say very detailed person. The bottom line is all I care about. I don't care about the minutiae in between the start and the finish. I just need to know we started and where's the finish line, and let's go get after that. So she helps balance me there, because she says, well, wait a minute, what about this? What about that? And she brings me back into reality a lot of times, and has brought me back into reality a lot of times during our marriage together. So she is much more of a person that's going to tell me that, hey, you need to tell that person thank you, because thank you is way off of my radar line, because I'm not about thank you. I'm about, did we get it finished on time? Did we not get it finished? So so she tells me, hey, you need to go back and thank that person, and more of the touchy-feely side of the equation, which I sometimes have a hard time getting my hands around. So.
My wife is a great Sherpa in the social circles. She
Exactly.
guides me by the elbow through the whole evening. Keeps me out of trouble. That's right. Well, I mean, do you look back? I mean, you obviously had, a difficult start there, but by the time you're in college now, you're starting to get your sea legs, right? You're starting to find your place. You've got a purpose. You're connected to people. You're starting to presumably be successful. How good was that football team?
Well, we played for the conference championships 2 of the years that I was there. We weren't very good when I was a sophomore.
Okay.
I started as a sophomore, started as a junior, started as a senior. So I had 3 good years. Back then, they did not allow freshmen to play on the varsity. So you had to sit out while you were a freshman. They have a freshman team, and then they had a small schedule that you played as a freshman. But so sophomore, junior, and senior year, we got better and better over the years. And it's kind of funny, I was teaching a Sunday school lesson about, I don't know, it's been 15, 20 years ago now, but I sat down there and I was telling the kids, I said, I played against a guy by the name of John Riggins and Danny White, and they were going, who are those people? Oh my. I'm getting old already. So anyway,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't even remember who those people are, but they were good football players.
Yes, they were.
So, but I don't know. It's just a time when, like you said, I was trying to really see where I wanted to go in the next step, and
right.
So, pro ball. I would have probably liked to do that, but when you get married, the next thing you know, you have children.
Right.
And so my senior year, we were just going to go play Arizona State, and my wife gave birth to our first child right before the game. Matter of fact, I had to catch a different plane than the rest of the team took, so I could be there for the birth, and then I caught up with the team there in Tempe. So so now I'm married and have a child in college.
You're all in.
Yeah, and no job, and just playing football.
Yeah.
So my wife had to work, and so we managed a little an apartment complex there, which we got our rent free, so that helped. But again, when it came time to think about the pro football thing, I was offered a walk-on opportunity with the New Orleans Saints, and decided not to do that because I didn't have any income, and just leaving her and a child there I didn't think was the right thing to do. So I decided not to do that, and ended up playing semi-professional football for a couple of years there in Albuquerque for a team that they started up that ended up being part of the USFL when it came online. So so anyway, but I decided at that point it was time to hang it up and move on to what my life was going to become. So again, another man there that kind of helped me out was a man by the name of Ben Bronstein, who owns all the pancake houses there, and owned a number of restaurants, and he put me as a manager of one of the restaurants there. So I did that for a while. Yeah. And Ben was a very good businessman, very astute, and very good with making sure that you did things right, and you did things that were profitable to the business, and so it was again a learning experience for me to watch and see how he operated. So
right. Now it's really interesting. You know, I run into a lot of folks who they talk about sort of the inflection points in their life and in their career, and I talk to a lot of people that describe a life of regret. Yeah. I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have stuck with that, and so forth. So, you know, you're starting to assume more and more responsibility, right, for you and Gail and the firstborn. And I guess you're probably in the midst of wrestling with how hard should I go pursue this football career? Right. Or do this other job that's here and do this other job that's here, right, you know, at the apartment and the pancake houses and whatever. Do you have any advice for young people, men and women that are sort of in an inflection point in their early years when they're wondering, you know, how far should I chase this dream versus at what point do I say, you know, I just don't know that that's going to happen and maybe I have to do these other things. Yes. And that's a hard thing to come to terms with. And I think it happens not only when you're 22 and 23 and 24, right, but when you're 43 and 44 and 45, right, and you feel like I only have maybe one chapter left. Right. Well, again, I'm kind of torn there a little bit because, you know, you've heard the advice, and I've heard the advice, go do something you love. Go find something that you really love, and then it's not like working anymore. Right. And so, well, football was like that for me. I mean, I loved football, and so it wasn't like work to me. Yeah. So, but on the other side of it, you have responsibilities. You have to make some real hard decisions about, well, wait a minute, is this the time that I can just go have fun and leave all of my other responsibilities and obligations go away? Or do I, again, get down to business and figure out how you make this thing work and go make it work? Yeah. So is that a regret today? No. And I will tell you, as I get older and I've gotten older, you find out what the real toll of playing big time football really is, and how it really impacts your body as you get older. Right. So, I mean, as you are very well aware that some of these pro athletes today, I mean, they can barely walk and having memory problems and all kinds of different things that have not gone as they had hoped. But right, on the other side of it, when I go talk to these guys, and I say the same thing, because I said the same thing to Norm Bulash that played at TCU and All-American there, and I saw him the other morning at church, and I said, boy, my body's sure beat up, and I feel the effects. And he said, oh, I do too. And I said, but I wouldn't have changed a thing, would you? And he said, no. So again, you look at one side of it and say, oh, yeah, is that regrettable that you are having those things now? But yes, that they're regrettable now, but I wouldn't have changed it. Right. So from a regret standpoint,
I don't have a lot of regrets. Everything that I went through has made me who I am today. And when you're young, you don't see that.
Right.
You only see what you're going through, and
Right.
and you don't see the other side of it. Well, I'm kind of at the other side, and so I see all of the things that have made me the person I am today. That I had not gone through those, I wouldn't be the same person. So
That's right.
I am happy about all the events, even though some of them were unpleasant.
That's right. Interview number 11 was a woman named Susan Thomas, who caretook, if you will, her husband as he died of cancer.
Oh.
And it took a number of years for that process to reach its inevitable end. And when I visited with her, she described at length that through the process, there comes a point where your prayers change.
Right.
And you're not praying for healing.
Right.
You're praying for your testimony.
Exactly.
And so when I think about young people or people at an inflection point in their career, sometimes they're praying that this thing would work out.
Yes.
That I would get a ticket to the big leagues.
Yes.
And maybe the prayer should be that as I go through these seasons of adversity, that it would strengthen my testimony.
Absolutely.
And build my character.
Absolutely.
I think it's Michael Jordan that said, difficult times don't build character, they reveal it.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yep.
Yeah. Fireside is produced by Leith Group. Editing and mixing by Rob Rigdon. Technical support by J.R. Foresteros, Richard and Heather Vanderdice, and Clay Morgan. Research by Dave Rigdon. Special thanks to all our interviewees and to Katie Bird and Dawn Leith. Coordination and transcription services by Amy Taylor. Fireside episodes are available for download at leithgroup.com/blog. You can also find Fireside and other Leith Group productions on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Leith Group and Blake Leith. A reminder that you don't have to wait for parts 2 and 3 of my interview with Bob Gaines. All 3 are available for download right now.